As the Morgan Gibbs-White debacle rolls on, I've invited Ash from Spurs Kings TV to discuss what the likely outcome of our chase for the England playmaker is, and to discuss all of the rest of the transfer rumours that Tottenham have been linked with so far this summer, as well as getting his take on the early days under Thomas Frank. Hi Ash, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Yes, very well. As we were just discussing off air, getting slightly, maybe bored would be too strong a word, but slightly tired of the Gibbs-White stuff. But as I said, people want to know what's happening. And, I think for me, it would be a really great signing if we got it over the line. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think Thomas Frank's clearly identified him as an important signing. He's a important cog in the wheel. So I think he's definitely a player that he wants in. And I think that's the reason why the club are trying to focus on getting this one done, as opposed to moving on to other targets, which is in turn frustrating the fan base because we're not moving on other targets. And I think people want to see other players come in, and we know how important the DM role is in. And a word just in from Ali Gold is that the feeling is that we need to have one player moved on before a player comes in with that position.
Okay, so Ali Gold's just, I saw that he did an article talking about Pellini, is that right?
Yeah, he did an article on Pellini, and he was basically saying that the feeling is that we need to move on one player, and hopefully, that would be Basuma. I think that's the one that feels like he's going to be the one to move, even though he wants to stay. And there are question marks around Bentancur because he hasn't signed a new deal yet. But I think the feeling around the fan base is that Basuma would be the one to move on, and then that would allow a player like, for example, a number 6 to come in, Pellini being one of them, defensive midfielder. Yeah, that's the actual remit at the moment.
How do you feel about, because I've talked a lot on my videos this summer about, I'm not that keen for us to bring in players who I feel have already had their big move, gone to a big club on big wages and then bring them back and maybe they'll be less kind of motivated and not show the same kind of desire. Is that something you'd have a worry about with Pellini, or do you think he's more of he's got a good enough attitude to deal with that?
I think he's professional. I think the fact that he's coming back to London might be a motivation in itself. Game time is massive for players as well. He didn't get a lot of game time at Bayern Munich for whatever reason. So I think he would want to come into the team, especially at Spurs, being in Champions League. It wouldn't be a back step for him. He'd still have a lot of things to prove in terms of being in a big 6, quote unquote, side. And maybe that might be motivating enough alongside with the London tax, as I said before, for him to come and want to come back into the Premier League and yeah, just, be a starting position, be a starting player.
And just bringing it back to Gibbs-White, what do you have an inkling in your head of what you think is going to happen? How you think this will end? What would you put your money on?
I just think it's the typical tactical Mexican standoff between two teams. You've got two chairmen with massive egos, and it's just how it works, in football. Obviously, I don't think this chairman, he doesn't want egg on his face to see that he's done any wrong. He's approached it the right way in his eyes, and therefore there's no need to do anything about it because, he's approached a club, was booked in for a medical. I don't know how true that is, but according to like the journalists, well-trusted ones as well, that was going to go through. And then a few hours later or a day later or so, then Tottenham Forest have said they put a hold on that whole move and said we've moved in an appropriate way and it's an illegal breach of contract because that release clause shouldn't have been known to the public. How have we come across this information? And so now it's just a case of, do we pay more and do we look like we're the guilty party, or do they eventually give in and say, look, we tried, fans? Because I feel like that's what it was when the fans were outraged that one of their poster boys were going to another club that finished below them. It was a bit of an outrage from the club, and I think the chairman's reacted off the back of that. So I just feel like as the window goes on, time passes by, someone's going to have to move. So it's either Spurs move and we drop the ego, or they drop their ego and they just allow the move to go through. Either way, I still think Morgan Gibbs-White can help push this to go through. If he is to put a little bit of pressure by handing in a transfer request. I don't think he's that type of player to do that, though. He's been described as very professional from his teammates. I know Aina came out, the fullback,
Yeah.
and he came out publicly and said that he's getting on with training, etc., etc. I have heard he's had a bit of abuse from the Forest fans and some threats, but he's had that wherever he's been at, even at Wolverhampton when he's getting moved over to Nottingham Forest, because they are obviously rivals in that kind of Black Country or that Midlands kind of region. So he's no stranger to that. But again, as he played in the week against Monaco, he did show a little heart sign after he got clapped off at half time. So he's very respectful. So I don't expect him to force a move. But in terms of the actual move itself, it's a waiting game at the moment. And I expect it to be done. I expect something to happen towards the end of the week, a decision to be made.
Yeah, I mean, just so the audience know, we're recording this kind of lunchtime on Tuesday. The plan is for it to go out on Wednesday. So if anything changes before then, obviously this video will be null and void. But the thing for me, Ash, I want to ask you, because you know, I really respect your views and knowledge around football. The thing that I don't really understand is we have reached the number of the release clause. So I don't really understand from a Nottingham Forest point of view how they think they're able to hold on to him. I don't really understand the legalities of that, because presumably contractual release clauses are, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is there must surely be some small print in that release clause that we haven't matched. Otherwise, I don't understand how they're able to keep hold of him.
I think maybe the structure of the payment, I think it was, according to the reports, it's meant to be a two-part payment over 2 years. And then maybe there are some details in how that's paid, and maybe they could ask for more money. And maybe that's where the dispute is, in terms of maybe we could go to the Premier League and say, look, we've met the release clause by law. Obviously, negligence is on their part, for obviously putting in the NDA, that 60 million release clause, and that could be the argument for Spurs' case. But then technically he's still under contract, and I don't know until what month that is or what date that particular date is till. So technically he's still a Forest player, and so they still have the contract still lies with them until a certain period. And I don't know what that period is. That's where the grey area is for me in my head. I know that they activated at a certain date, but I don't know where that date actually ends and where that finishes. So that maybe is the waiting game between Spurs and Forest on that side of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'll be really interesting as to, because obviously I've been reading all of the journalist reports, but none of them seem to have a kind of clear handle over what's exactly going on. It seems to have gone quite quiet. In terms of, obviously we saw the Reading game at the weekend. I felt, in the first half we played Alfie Devine in that 10 role, and I was really impressed with how much space he got, and it suddenly made me think, oh, I can really understand why they're pushing for Morgan Gibbs-White, because James Maddison I think would really flourish in that role, but also he doesn't play enough minutes on the pitch. He gets injured too much. So does it make sense to you as well as to why he's really pushing for Gibbs-White for that role?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, if you're watching Spurs versus Reading or Reading versus Spurs, that in the build-up phase, I felt that sometimes we were quite conservative and we tried to build up quite slowly. And there was times when I wanted to get the players, especially as you mentioned, Devine was on the right-hand side. So he was in the gap between Brennan Johnson and Porro, and he was often pulling out wide to receive the ball as a right-sided midfielder. I felt that at times, if you're a midfielder, you need to demand the ball, and you need to have little short, sharp movements to come and receive and get that ball, and then get on a turn and then push up. With Devine, I felt that, yes, he was, picking up good positions, but was he demanding that ball? Did the players respect him enough to give him that ball in those pockets where he could drive up the field and make things happen? And with a Morgan Gibbs-White, technically in those tight areas, in those tight spaces where players try to press him, that he's got the agility and physicality and explosiveness to separate himself from a marker or one or two players to take him out the game, and then push Spurs into a quick transitional attack, which looks like a counter attack at times, when really it's just the actual player that's forcing the move, that wants to pass forward or wants to carry the ball forward or dribble or take his man on. So I think that was a key area for me where I saw, Morgan Gibbs-White especially on the right hand side, because Maddison is more on the left hand side, where he would drop deep to kind of progress the ball. And then even so, Maddison he likes to link the play by passing and then turning, or using a outside of the boot pass around the midfielder. He tends to do that, whereas Morgan Gibbs-White can do that, but he likes to drive with the ball a bit more and won't go to ground as much if he feels a knock in behind him.
Yeah, and let's talk about a worst case scenario. Say we're not able to get this Gibbs-White deal over the line, and we're then looking for another number 10. Do you have any names in your head as to where we might go next?
It's different because I don't necessarily. I know Morgan Gibbs-White plays predominantly as a number 10. I just wonder if we've got another idea for him in a role where he could play a 10, but he could also play an 8.
Like where
And
Sarr was starting the weekend.
Yeah, Sarr was starting the weekend, and Devine was the 10. And I'm just thinking, is there a world where he does drop into 8 at times, or it's fluid where sometimes he's the 10, sometimes he's the 8? The reason why I say that, because that opens up the scope for more midfielders. And in the past, I know in January we were looking at a player from PSV Eindhoven, who plays as a 10 box-to-box / player, and he goes by the name of Malik Tillman, and he scored quite a few goals in that league. I know a lot of people don't rate the Dutch league, but again, he's a player that maybe they might revisit and look to, because he has got Champions League experience. He has scored quite a few goals in the Champions League as well, and is highly rated. So maybe they might look for a profile he's quite young as well, 23, 22 years old. So maybe that could be a backup option, or someone that they might go for if he doesn't go through. There's
some reports I've seen today. Some reports today suggesting that we might be looking at Conor Gallagher.
Yes, Conor Gallagher is a player that has played in a 10 or 8 role. The thing with Conor Gallagher, that's different to maybe a Gibbs-White, is the technical level. I think in the build-up play, I think that's where a lot of Spurs fans are looking at. Do we have enough players that are comfortable in the build-up? Conor Gallagher, for me, is better when we're in the attacking third, or more or less the mid third. When we're trying to get it out from the back, is he able to look after the ball, shield it, protect it? Does he have the IQ to lay it off? He's quite conservative in terms of build up and likes to play it safe. However, when he is further forward, he's more of a goal threat than, say, like a Papa Sarr. And that's the reason why I say like that kind of dual box to box. He's more of a box to box. I know he did play a 10 role at Crystal Palace, and he did do quite well there. But again, the criticism I would say with him is sometimes he does overplay that kind of Hollywood pass when it's not really on. And again, he's not bad of a dribbler, but when he's trying to dribble from out the back, that's when he looks a bit clunky. He can lose the ball, doesn't look as smooth as a player. But you could say that like with players like Rice. Rice is not a 10, he's an 8. But I get those type of vibes with Conor Gallagher, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Reports suggesting that Thomas Frank wants all of the incomings done before the Asia tour. That's not going to happen, is it, realistically?
No, I mean, in the ideal world, in football, you get all the players you want, right? You get everyone now. And I see how the club were trying to act. They were trying to get Gibbs-White straight after Kudos. Do you know what I mean? That would have been a great signing, and that would have changed the mood in the fan base. But unfortunately, football was football. No one could have envisioned what Forest were doing, especially after we repaid them after getting Brennan Johnson when they were in some type of financial struggles. And we said, you know what? We'll pay that fee for you, and you won't get a 6-point ban, when they finished 17th and could have potentially got relegated. So, yeah, football, business is business, and, there's no friends out here.
Let me ask you a difficult question. Would you, if you thought it was going to grease the wheels, would you offer Johnson again, Olay as part of the Gibbs-White deal?
I would, yeah. I would. I know he's our top scorer. Last season, he scored important goals. He obviously scored the winner. But a lot of people said we got the wrong lady. We got the wrong player from Forest. He was the one that was creating a lot of the goals for Johnson. A lot of people say like Johnson's a straight line runner. They maybe say that, we were playing him out of position. He's actually a striker or a second striker. Playing him on the wing doesn't make sense because he's not a player that can beat his man like that. But Gibbs-White for me is the better of the two. And yeah, I would potentially do that, even though they do they do need a player because they did sell Langer. So, you know, there is some room there, but I don't know if they're looking at Gibbs-White at all. I think they're looking more for a replacement for Gibbs-White at the moment in the form of McAtee.
Yeah, he's still young, Brennan Johnson. I'm really hopeful. He didn't have a great 45 minutes against Reading, but I'm really hopeful that under Frank and with the confidence of having kind of grown up, you know, in terms of having scored the winner in the Europa League final, kind of almost like grown up through the hierarchy of the players at the club. I think kind of being more rated, that he might have a good season. But I also wonder whether maybe he'll be tried a little bit on the left if Sonny and Richarlison end up leaving. So we mentioned a little bit about the Reading friendly. Standout performances for you, other than maybe the obvious in Vuskovic?
Kudos, of course, right? Kudos was the for me, he was the
was he a player before we signed him that you wanted us to get, or were you a little nervous?
Well, I said to my friend, he's a Newcastle fan, back in January, I said, look, this guy's going under the radar. I think he might go for a move. If I was Newcastle, I'd go for Kudos, you know. So happens that, you know, we got linked to him, and then before you knew it, we had the deal done. I was so shocked that we got it over the line so quickly. And yeah, I'm ecstatic about him. I've been following him since Ajax days. And I remember one of my other Spurs mates, he's on YouTube as well, Jacob, United States Spurs of America. He was gutted when he went to West Ham because that was a player we were looking at, and we went for Johnson instead. And he was like, oh, he could play the 10, he could go out wide, he could do so many different roles. But, you know, he's here now. So what can I say, man? What a player, quality. Yeah. I think he improves us a lot.
Very, very impressive cameo on Saturday. I guess for me, a lot of it will be about what happens when, you know, he's asked to play on from the bench a little bit. What happens when he's rotated? What's his personality like? Because a lot of the West Ham fans kind of fell out of love with him when he fell out with Julian Lopetegui, and then he never really came back into it under Graham Potter. Although, obviously, it's reported that his favoured positions are kind of right-sided forward, right wing, or the number 10, and he was asked to play on the left a lot because Jared Bowen plays for West Ham, and he's obviously the main man there.
Yeah, it is a question of mentality, so I do hear what you're saying. But I think Frank spoke to him, said, I want you, I've got a particular role for you. And he was obviously ecstatic about it. And that was one of the major reasons why he moved. So seeing him start on the right and also drifting centrally as well at times kind of told me enough that, you know, this player is going to be utilized in his preferred position. And I do know Frank likes his players to cut in on their stronger foot. And obviously, Kudos is left-footed and is playing on the right. So, yeah, for me, I'm very excited. He is quite one-footed, but he makes up for that in his explosiveness, his dynamism, his ability to be unpredictable. And he said in an interview, when he sees space, he can't help but run into it. And that just excites me. The ability just to take on 3 or 4 players and just leave the other side completely naked, that just opens up a whole doorway of goals for the other player on the opposite flank for me. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. The disappointment for me was that I like that he plays with his head up. There was a ball he played into, I think it was Lancashire, or was it Donnelly?
Was it Donnelly when he'd beaten the men down the right?
Yeah, I thought he could have played it across the sun in the box. I thought they would probably talk to him about that, you know, on the video, trying to say that maybe you just play that ball there. And but generally, like, I thought even that he picked him out, I thought that was good because a lot of our players are telegraphed. They're predictable. We know how we play. The fact that he had his head up and thought maybe this pass that no one else sees as a better option, I kind of like that he's making his own decision making, because sometimes we are predictable, and those type of crosses teams know, and he will try to block that.
That's it. I was saying on the watch along, it was interesting. If Ange Postecoglou was still the manager, he would absolutely be screaming at him for not doing that pass.
Yeah.
But maybe he thought that the keeper would telegraph it and try and block it. And in the end, the only problem with the pass was actually that it went to Donnelly's kind of right side. And Donnelly is more comfortable on the left, and so he had to kind of shift it to his left. And in the end, you know, we still nearly scored. But the thing I love about Kudos that I think could be really exciting as long as he keeps his motivation and drive going is he's got this kind of main character energy about him where he really wants the ball all the time. He wants to be the guy who's going to excite the crowd. And he has this, he has a kind of Moussa Dembele-esque strength where just opposition players just bounce off him. And I was just as impressed in that 45 minutes by the time where he kind of held the ball up and 3 players bounced off him as he turned in central midfield, as I was by that run down the right hand side. As kind of sexy as that was, I was just like, oh, to have more play. I mean, listen, no shade on Brennan Johnson, but he's never a player who's going to pick it up in the middle of the pitch, have opposition players bounce off him, and then open the game up. And Kudos has got that as well.
You made a very good point there, and players that want the ball, because there's not enough players. Like a lot of times, Spurs players can go hiding, and that can affect us in terms of moving up the pitch, especially when things are quite tight. You need players that want to drop in, they're comfortable on the ball, and they're able to like let the ball stick to them, and that gives us more possession, and that sustains pressure on the opposition. There's loads of times where momentum hasn't gone our way or momentum shifted the other way because players aren't shown for it. They don't want the ball, and so for me, I'm like, the benchmark has to be players like Kudos. And you're right, that whole Dembele-esque vibe, I am happy if he's happy to go into that midfield role, and he's the one that, you know, we look for in terms of possession, and that attracts 2 or 3 players that want to stick to him. And because he, like you said, when they bounce him, he actually uses that as momentum, and then he thrives off that, and then he turns into like an Incredible Hulk. Really excites me, as you can see. But yeah,
and he can drag his fullback inside, because they'll be like, I have to stick with him, and then Porro or Spence will get so much room, you know, into that gap on the right fullback. Just wanted to ask you, obviously it was especially big transfer kind of rumor talk around the time where we put in that bid for Gibbs-White about potential big investment coming into the club, whether or not that's already gone into ENIC and that's why they're willing to spend, and possibly this stadium naming rights deal as well. There was some talk just after the Europa League final, some rumors that Spurs were going to get some investment around the beginning of this following season. Do you think we're going to hear something in the next month or 2?
Yeah, it was crazy. Like about a week or 2 ago, there was so much noise about the investment, and it was really loud. But you know what? The fact that it's gone quiet, I'm not so mad at, because I don't want other teams to look at us that, you know, we're a money cash cow, and Spurs are now operating differently. We're willing to spend money, because that will inflate the price for players that we may want or have targets we may have. So yeah, I personally, it's not my money, but I personally think the investment will happen, only because it's been spoken about for such a long time. It's not really just the back end of last season. It's been murmured throughout the season. I mean, I remember like the boxing fight, you know, between Eubank. There was the Sheiks that came down. They were really impressed, and they were talking about the investment, you know, maybe making it into a stadium they wanted to invest in terms for boxing. There was other talks as well before that, just about side talks about, you know, the change around with Levy and Charrington being one of Lewis's guys, and ENIC injecting some more money.
Henry Cullen going as well.
Exactly. So that's one side of the things as well. Donna Staveley, obviously, the PIF rumors in terms of they wanting to, you know, move away from Newcastle and look for different clubs. They were rumored to look for a Big Six club as well. She's known to do a lot of consortiums, meaning like, you know, multiple investments. She's good at like finding an investor and then, you know, linking it to the club. So there's been multiple rumors of different types of investment coming into the club. And maybe Lewis, obviously, he had that big court case where he had to put the club into the shares, you know,
into a trust.
Into a trust story.
Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, one of these rumors,
because he's a criminal.
One of these rumors have to be true, Barnaby. I'm just saying. So there's no smoke without fire for me. So yeah, as I said before previously, I'm happy that it's calmed down a little bit, you know, the talking, and we can just get on with the transfers, and we can just get into our targets quietly and just pick off our players one by one.
Yeah, and just finally, Ash, and thanks so much for coming on the show. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of social media in the last couple of days that the kind of corner of the Spurs fan base who like to really get on Daniel Levy's back are already kind of piping back up. They were silenced over the 24 hours where it looked like we were going to spend 115 million on Kudos and Gibbs-White. And now that the Gibbs-White deal is taking a long time, they're starting to almost suggest that Daniel Levy has faked this deal and is that it's not real, just to try and keep the fans off his back. Do you see that? Do you think the Spurs fan base are again going in on Levy? And what will it take? What will it ever take, really, for Daniel Levy to get his reputation improved amongst the fan base?
I think it's PTSD settling back in. I think seasons gone by, Spurs fans have been burnt, where a lot of things haven't really happened. False promises, false dawns, and I think that's where the kind of skepticism comes back into it. I think if the window goes well, it will be a Charrington, it will be a Vinay masterclass. But if it doesn't go too well, it'll go back to Langer and it'll go down to Levy. I think that's just the way it is. It's the nature of the beast. Either way, I don't think they're too bothered, because I think things have changed slightly structurally in terms of the way we're moving. The only thing that was holding up the Gibbs-White deal, I think, was Forest. It wasn't really us. So in terms of that, I think fans just want to see us move on quickly if that doesn't get resolved. And they want another marquee target like an Eze or Xavi Simons or Simmons, someone of that ilk. I think fans would be more happy if, we moved on from Gibbs-White, even though they're slightly different profiles, in my opinion. But people just want to be reassured that we are moving in that direction and we're not going back to, all right, we didn't get Gibbs-White, let's just go and get, I don't know, nobody. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the panic is settling in with Spurs fans. I think it's just how it is with football. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think that makes sense. Yeah. I think PTSD is the perfect way of answering it. All right, Ash, listen, thanks so much for coming on the show. Two things just before you go. Firstly, tell the audience where they can find Spurs Kings TV. And secondly, just afterwards, to end on, tell us what day we're going to find out whether Morgan Gibbs-White is actually coming to Spurs or not.
Jeez. Yes, you can find me on all platforms, on X. You can find me on YouTube, more importantly, on Spurs Kings TV. Just type that in, the handle. And then also the Gibbs-White deal for me will be intensified this Sunday. I'd say Sunday coming in before we go off on that tour. I think that's when things will start to move, in my opinion.
You heard it here first, guys. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Make sure you do go and subscribe to Spurs Kings TV. Also, do give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe to my channel for daily Tottenham transfer news and all the news and views from White Hart Lane. Enjoy your Wednesday. Let's hope for some more news on the Morgan Gibbs-White situation soon. Cheers.